So good afternoon, or buenas tardes. Welcome to your expat training for Venezuela, brought to you by PMT Training. My name is Monique, and my colleagues and I, Tristan and Phi, we prepared a short presentation on what we think you need to know for Venezuela for your 2-year relocation. Our agenda for today consists of a country overview, current events, economic climate, currency and exchange rates, trade barriers, cost of living, and last but not least, informal institutions. So we will begin with Tristan with his country's overview.
Hi, my name is Tristan, and I will be covering Venezuela's country overview as well as its currency. Venezuela, as the world currently knows it, was established on July 5th, 1829, and it comes from a Spanish colonial heritage, which may explain why the country tends to have more Spanish or European persons in positions of power, especially within the government. For their culture, it is very 1950s traditional in the sense that men hold the more important jobs within politics, economics, religion, etc., whereas women occupy more jobs within domestic and household occupations.
So as you can see from the picture, if you didn't already know, that's President Nicolas Maduro of the Socialist Party of Venezuela. And he was celebrating the introduction of something called a cryptocurrency, which they named El Pedro. So what is the cryptocurrency? It's a digital currency backed by oil, gas, and diamond reserves, just like their trading partners in China that have the petro yuan, and Russia that are trying to develop the crypto turbo, which is another digital currency. So why did they introduce the cryptocurrencies? To combat the U.S. financial blockade. Because the U.S. has made sanctions to Venezuela, sources have saying they were scrutinizing the transactions made by Venezuelan government, such as bond payments and complicated oil exports. And the U.S. sanctions have actually hurt the Venezuelan government ability to move money into international banks. So Maduro believed that the introduction of the cryptocurrency would be good because digital currency like Bitcoin was rising in the mainstream investment sector. However, nowadays Bitcoin's not doing so well. People were saying when he introduced the cryptocurrency that it was not a good idea because Venezuela has such a high degree of poverty, and the cryptocurrency provided no immediate relief to the poverty. And so not many that thought they were a good idea was the opposition parties. Parties such as Justice First, Popular Will, and the Democratic Action believed it wasn't a good idea. And so Maduro decided, I'm going to ban the opposition parties from running in the next election. Now, here's a video summarizing the current events and the economic climate in Venezuela right now.
Peter Kernan, what's your take on the collapse of Venezuela?
You know, the real tragedy in all this, Stuart, is that if you go back a few years ago when oil was at $100 a barrel, what was it doing for the people of Venezuela? What did they do during all those periods of time when they were manufacturing and producing oil at this very high? They squandered it. They borrowed heavily. They're in debt up to here to China. Did they help their people? No. Did they do things with their hospitals or their schools? No. They had $100 oil, and they squandered. They have enough oil in Venezuela to embarrass the Saudis. They are swimming in oil. What did they do when they had peak oil prices? Nothing. They ran a Venezuelan socialist opportunity for Maduro and his friends to enrich themselves. They did not help the people. They were nationalizing things like the food stores and all of that. They ran their business and their country into the ground with record high oil prices. Blaming it on today's $50, where were you at $100? You were in the same soup.
Well said, Peter. Thanks for straightening that one out. Got it.
So here's Phi to elaborate more on Venezuela's economic climate.
Hello everyone, my name is Phi. Now let's go back to the economic climate. The economy of Venezuela is largely based on the petroleum sector and manufacturing. 50% of the country's GDP is come from the export of the oil production, and 95% of the export come from oil production. In the group OPEC, Venezuela is the 6th largest member by oil production. OPEC is the organization that makes up for 44% of the oil production in the world. However, Venezuela is facing some down some decline on the economy. Look at the table to see some numbers that make the country getting worse. First, the inflation. It increased 720% in this year, 2017. And the unemployment is 26% in this year too. This number is extremely high. And let's look at the ease of doing business rank. This rank is how easy to do business in the country. And they rank at 188. That's like the bottom of the whole world. That's a very low number. So what is the reason that make the country getting worse these years? First, because of the government. They don't spend the money of the country properly. The second reason is the oil. The price of oils declined dramatically this year. So just think about that. In 2014, the price of a barrel of oils is $100. However, this year, 2017, it's just $50 a barrel. That's like half down. And like I said, about 50% of GDP of the countries come from export oils. And if the price of the oil is down, they have less money to spend. That means the economy getting worse. The last reason, they are running out of cash. Let's look at the picture. At the moment, they own about 15 billions to some country all over the world, especially United States. But the money that they have in bank is just approximately about 12 billions. So you can see the story, you can do the math. They're getting worse in the last 4 years because of that. Okay, so now let's go to the Tristan part with the currency and exchange rate.
Now moving on to currency. The currency used in Venezuela is referred to as the Venezuelan Bolivar or the Bolivar Fuerte, which came into monetary law in 1879, replacing the Venezolano at a rate of 1 Venezolano to 5 Bolivars. These are the exchange rates for the Bolivar to the Canadian dollar as well as the US dollar. And these are the coins and banknotes used in the country. There are also other banknotes such as the 2, 5, 10, 20, 50, and 100 Bolivar banknotes, which aren't used as frequently within the society. It's pretty well known that Venezuela has been and still is a very corrupt country, and some of the corruption comes from the currency, where on the black market you can get 3,000 bolivars to 1 US dollar, as opposed to the official conversion rate, which is 10 bolivars to the US dollar. The difference in trade quality is too great to pass up for tourists and travelers, which only contributes to the corruption of the country. Venezuelans need the US dollars to import goods, to travel, or just to save up money. Now here's Phi to talk about trade barriers.
Okay, thanks Tristan. Now let's move to the barriers when you want to do business in Venezuela. First, for non-agricultural goods and services, there are some products such as medical devices, cosmetic, or drugs. They require an approval in advance by the Ministry of Health. And the name for that is here, the picture on the right, Miss Salud. Okay? The bad thing about it is it takes very long time to do the process. It takes about 3 to 6 months to get approved. The second bad thing is only the importer can request the product approval. That means if you're outside of the country, you have to contact your partner in Venezuela to process the approval process. Okay? The second product is agricultural goods and service. That's what we are looking for because we are a food company. The government requires the importer to have a certificate from Ministry of Good and Agriculture for most of agricultural imports, but they don't provide any evidence as a scientific basis. In other words, they use it to restrict the number of imports in this category to the country. And the second thing, if the foods that are not registered in the original country, you cannot register in Venezuela. Okay? So now let's move to the cost of living. For the cost of living, I will compare between Toronto, Canada to Caracas. Okay, can you look at the picture? So for most of the category, it seems cheaper. With the green color, that means it's cheaper to live in Venezuela. So for the food, 50%, 55% cheaper, housing about 53% cheaper, and like that. In total, it's about 48% cheaper. In other words, if you spend monthly on in Toronto about $20,000, it's gonna take only about 1,000 in Venezuela, 48% cheaper in total. Okay, now take a look at this. Although that some of the products are very cheap out there, however, because of the demand and the shock of supply in the country, these products are extremely expensive in the country. Just take a look at that. First, Apple is very expensive. So in the New York price, it's just $3.3 US, and the price there is about $18 for 1 kilogram. And the most expensive here is a TV 40 inches. It's 1,200% more expensive. So these are some products that it's more expensive. Like Tristan had mentioned a little bit about the money, the price of the Venezuelan dollars decreased every year in the last 10 years. A quick picture, take a look at that. This is the picture of a line of people. They have to wait to buy some daily food in the supermarket when the recession happens. Okay, so that's all. Now let's move to the informal situation by Monique.
So thank you, Phi. So now let's switch gears and talk about the informal institutions. I'm talking about the Venezuelan culture, ethics, and business etiquette, which would be very important for your group when you're heading over to Venezuela. So first things first, Venezuela is considered a very high context culture versus Canada, which is very low context. And how do we know this? So in the graph, you can see that Venezuela has a very high uncertainty avoidance and very low individualism, which means they're a very collectivistic society. So it's very important when you go to any meeting, social meetings, business meetings, to always introduce yourself and provide your credentials, your professional ranking, your academic ranking, because of their high uncertainty avoidance. They rely heavily, Venezuelan businessmen and women rely heavily on the trust and building relationships. And the relationships take time to build with business individuals. They think that relationships are more important than the documents and the facts that you provide in any business meeting. So when you do come and you meet them, these are the business etiquette factors I would say you should consider. So when you meet them, you always give them a firm handshake, eye contact, a warm smile, and appropriate greeting. So either it be buenos dias, good morning, buenas tardes, good afternoon, or buenas noches, which is good night or good evening. And you always shake the eldest person's hands first. When you're leaving, you have to give individual goodbyes. And again, when you address yourself, say your professional title as well as your last name until they invite you to talk about and introduce yourself by your first name. When you go to dinners or any business dinners, you should arrive 15 to 30 minutes later. Because if you're too early or you're on time, Venezuelans think you might be too eager and interpret that as greedy. When you go to these dinners, dress conservative but elegant. And never refuse a coffee or tea from the Venezuelans. That's their symbol of hospitality. When you go to business meetings, though, try to not schedule the business meetings on Fridays because they'd like to leave early for the weekend, as well as it's going to be very, very difficult for you to schedule business meetings 2 to 3 weeks before these holidays, Easter, Christmas, and Carnival. When it comes to negotiations, like I said earlier, Venezuelans care about the relationships more than the documents. They don't care about the facts and the documents that are provided to them, more so than the person that they're speaking with. And so when you do negotiations, it's going to take some time, and you first need to establish trust. Okay, so we just want to thank you for listening to our presentation today. We hope you learned something that'd be quite useful for your relocation in Venezuela, and we at PMT Trading wish you good luck on your trip and future endeavors.
Bye.